Same as now.
David Ward.
I discussed Gaza with the Israeli Prime Minister, Foreign Minister and Defence Minister during my visit there last week. I stressed that economic revitalisation will best safeguard Israel's security. Gaza's dependence on aid will continue until there is progress on exports and a better framework is developed for enabling imports of reconstruction materials for UN-led projects.
Mr. David Ward.
Thank you for that answer, Secretary of State. Would he also agree with me that the blockade represents not only an act of inhumanity, but also is against the long-term security of Israel and therefore against its national interest?
Yes, I do agree with my honourable friend. I've said before in this House that I think the blockade of Gaza is unsustainable and unacceptable. The tunnel economy that has arisen in Gaza often serves the interests of Hamas rather than the interests of anyone else. And so it is very important, I think, for Israel to continue to allow an improvement in the flow of goods into Gaza, and as I say, now to begin to allow reconstruction materials so we can have a real improvement in the conditions on the ground in Gaza. That, I think, will help the security of the whole region.
Sir Gerald Kaufman.
Is the right honourable gentleman aware that in a briefing provided for me last week in Jerusalem by John Ging, the admirable head of UNRWA in Gaza, Mr. Ging said that the situation in Gaza now is worse than it was before the flotilla incident, that huge numbers of children are going hungry and undernourished, that the schools are not being built. Will the right honourable gentleman take every action available to him to impress on the Israelis that persecuting the people of Gaza will not bring peace?
Well, I have indeed, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Speaker, been raising it with all the leaders of the Israeli government on my own visit to Jerusalem and Tel Aviv last week. He's absolutely right that the school construction that we hope that we wanted to take place is not yet taking place. The British government have announced additional help for Mr. Ging's work, for the UNRWA work, £23 million of new support for the Palestinian Authority, £8 million of that for UNRWA, £2 million to help 300 businesses in Gaza. And so Britain is doing a lot to help the situation there, and we must continue to do so.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I congratulate my right honourable friend on an outstanding visit to the State of Israel last week? But Israel has clearly honoured obligations of humanitarian areas for an aid for Gaza. Did the discussion that took place last week concentrate on the effect that Hamas has done in terms of its rocket capability on launching rockets and bombs into the State of Israel?
Well, of course, it is very important to bear in mind that dimension as well, the behaviour of Hamas, which obviously makes all these issues much more difficult to deal with. And indeed, I visited the family of Gilad Shalit, still imprisoned, held hostage in Gaza. I believe he should be released immediately and unconditionally. So it is very important. My honourable friend is right. It is very important to bear in mind that dimension to what is happening in Gaza. But I think we are united in this House in making the case to Israel, as I made that case last week, that the best way to improve Israel's security is to permit and encourage an improvement in the conditions in Gaza. That in itself will, over time, weaken Hamas and will ensure that will help to ensure that a new generation of Palestinians are not turned against Israel and against peace.
Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the Foreign Secretary's recognition of the importance of lifting the blockade of Gaza? He will know the importance for the people of Gaza, not just of lifting the blockade, but also of being part of a viable Palestinian state alongside a secure Israel in a two-state solution. So can I therefore ask him what discussions he had in his recent visit of the role of Gaza in the future peace process?
Well, it plays ultimately a very important role in the peace process, because there cannot be a successful peace in the long term without the involvement of Gaza and the inclusion of Gaza. The immediate priority, of course, is to get the peace process going again, and the direct talks going. And, of course, I put the argument very strongly to Israeli leaders and on the Israeli media that that requires a new freeze on Israeli settlement building on the West Bank. That is the immediate issue to get the... and the announcements that we have heard in the last 24 hours are extremely disappointing in that regard, might I add. And that is the immediate priority, to get the direct talks going. Of course, a settlement, a real settlement, would have to involve Gaza as well.